Hello, friends and enemies, and welcome into the first chapter of the First Chapter Explorers Club. That's the plan anyway. I'm recording multiple in a batch today, and I think that this will be the first one going out. If you submitted a story and I've decided to go ahead and read it, I did get quite a few submissions, so I'm sort of just randomizing what order they go up in. And today we are going to be reading a science fiction book. It is called The Moon Run by Kathleen. Contine. I hope I'm saying that right. I think I meant to include a pronunciation guide in the form, and then I forgot. So that's on me. But yeah, The Moon Run. He's her biggest rival in The Moon Run, and the reason her co-pilot is dead. Now they're being forced to race together. Finley Clark swore off racing after a fatal crash cost her first place and her teammate. As she comes around to the idea of entering again, she finds out the only person who is willing to be her new co-pilot is the man named Garrus who caused the crash. As Finley and Garrus enter the moon run, they realize there's more than just harsh desert out to get them. The other racers will stop at nothing to win, even if it means they have to kill. Can Finley and Garrus put aside their past to win the race? The Moon Run is the first book in a sci-fi racing series by Kathleen Contine. If you like action, compelling characters, and a dash of romance, then you'll love this new space adventure. Well, I'm already on board. I love space and space racing. Sounds really exciting. I love this premise. All right, let's take a look at this first chapter here. Yeah, as mentioned, though, real quick, this is the first episode, so I'm still kind of figuring out the format of this. If you have any suggestions, feel free to leave them in the comments. And of course, if you're an indie author or have your writing available online anywhere, there's a submission form. I would love to hear from you all. I really just want to create a community that's focused on supporting indie authors and being able to promote each other and find new ways to connect with readers. And with all that business out of the way, let's dive into the first chapter of The Moon Run. Content warnings for the first chapter and the story as a whole. The first chapter contains off-screen death, and the book contains some violence, alcohol, and death. Finley Clark would never get used to hurtling across the desert at hundreds of miles an hour in a small metal tube. Most people saw her ship with its faded red paint flying toward the city and thought she was a talented pilot, especially because she stayed in first place for the entire race. Finley never bothered to tell anyone that in the last few minutes of every race, she barely had any control of the ship. Even now, the joystick vibrated violently in her hands as she pushed it forward, surrounded by the endless buttons and knobs she'd meticulously memorized. Just a little bit more. Behind her in the navigation chair sat her co-pilot, Kane. He faced backwards, his attention on the many monitors in front of him. They took up the entirety of the back of the small ship so that he needed to crane his neck to see every screen. Every so often, he would type something to check on the ship or the location of the other racers. "We've got one coming up behind us." "I'm not too worried about it. We're too far ahead of the others for someone else to take first place now," Finley said. But she kept an eye on her radar as the small dot behind them grew closer. "Don't get too cocky, Finn. It's Garrus," Kane cautioned. Finley smirked. "Don't worry about him. Just worry about who's buying the first round once we win." Kane laughed. "It'll be me. Always me." That does seem to be the case, doesn't it? She'd been paired with Kane a few years into her racing career, and their winning streak hadn't stopped since. Finley knew Kane was responsible for most of her wins. There was no one else around she wanted as her co-pilot. A third voice came over the communicators, deep and gravelly. "Don't spend money you haven't won yet." Kane laughed. "How about joining us, Bizen? Our agent needs to celebrate with us once in a while."
"I prefer to swim in my money instead of spending it on drinks."
Finley sighed as her eyes narrowed on the flat, sandy terrain before her. "Later, guys. I need to concentrate." The small outline of the city grew closer. She pictured the crowd waiting for the ships to come roaring through the finish line. Her and Kane climbing out of their ship to cheers as the president of the Moon Run handed them a trophy, while they wore first-place medals. The next day would be filled with the flash of cameras, the shaking of hands, and multiple interviews. And then, just like that, they would start it all over again as they entered their next race. But they weren't there yet. "Hang tight, Garrus coming up on your left," Kane said. "It doesn't make sense. I don't understand how he's caught up to us so fast." Out the left side of the cockpit window, another ship the same size as theirs steadily made its way past. It kicked up a cloud of dust, making it nearly impossible to see anything. Somehow, Finley's grip tightened even more on the joystick. Why is it always Garrus? You're both evenly skilled. A good rivalry makes for good races and more bets, Kane said matter-of-factly. I still haven't forgiven him for that last race in Kveka, she yelled over the rumbling of the cockpit. We should have won. 0.3 seconds is 0.3 seconds, Kane said, mimicking Bizen. Finley held in her groan as she eyed a small switch on the dashboard. One quick push and it would give them a small burst of speed. Easy there, Kane said. How did you know I was thinking of using it? Whenever the sprint to the finish line is between you and Garrus, you always want to use it. Well, you did say to only use it for emergencies. And this is as good a time as any. Finley flipped up the case covering the switch. Hang on. I don't know if this is a good idea. It's this or lose. With a satisfying click, she pushed the switch down. The ship rattled and shot forward, pushing Finley back into her seat. They flew through the sand cloud, past Garrus' ship, and back into the lead. She risked taking her eyes away from the window to look at him as they passed. Garrus sat in his cockpit with his head down. The visor on his helmet obscured his face, so she couldn't be sure if he saw them or not. Finley waved anyway before focusing back on the race. Are you happy with yourself? Kane asked. Of course, she answered. How much farther to the finish line? Before Kane could answer, Garrus' ship pulled up next to them. Red light filled the tiny cabin as an alarm sounded in the cockpit. He's way too close. You need to take evasive maneuvers, Finn, Kane yelled. You think? She tilted the joystick and their ship veered to the right. Garrus' ship followed, so close that she could see the individual buttons inside his cockpit. Her heart pounded against her chest as she tried to avoid him, but it didn't work. Garrus tailed her, his ship growing closer and closer. Alarms blared in Finley's ears. What is he doing? You really need to get some space or he'll crash us both. Kane's voice came out an octave higher than usual. I'm trying! Suddenly, the sand dunes and jagged rock they were speeding over seemed much more dangerous than before. Finley pulled back on the joystick. She would slow down and make him go by her to give them more space. But she didn't account for how close the two ships' wings were. They clipped Garrus' ship and were suddenly spinning out of control. She could hear a voice crackling through the radio, but it was drowned out by the sound of metal crunching and crashing around her. Finley's ejection seat kicked in, and she flew in the air. Up and up and up she went. She moved so fast she had no time to wonder what had happened to the other ship. Her stomach flipped as gravity started to pull her back toward the ground, but before it could, a parachute shot from her seat and slowed her fall. Controlling her breathing became almost impossible as she flew above the desert. Below her, the ships rolled together over the sand in a fiery ball of metal and debris. Finley's heart dropped as they violently slammed against a rock sticking out of the sand. The other ships flew by the wreckage, only slowing down to avoid the burning metal. Kane. The ship was supposed to eject his seat, too. She hoped it had. She called for him through the radio, voice shaky. Kane! Kane, where are you? I'm in the air, but I don't see you. Only static answered. She tried not to look at the fire. The thoughts could come swarming in too easily if she did. Grabbing the parachute's handles, she maneuvered herself to the ground as quickly as possible. The seat landed in the sand with a thump, and she fumbled with the buckles before bursting out. Her feet kicked up sand behind her as she sprinted toward the wreckage. But when she got there, she realized she didn't know what she planned on doing. She stood helpless, the blazing fire growing bigger and bigger, with no sign of Kane. Kane! Where are you? She screamed into the unbearable heat. The only answer was the growing flames and twisted metal. Her uncertainty slowly ballooned to fear as she looked around for anything or anyone that could help. Another ship flew by, the wind knocking her off her feet. Someone's firm grip locked onto her upper arms, dragging her away from the wreckage. She looked up to see Garrus, his black helmet cracked and dirty. Are you stupid? They could blow up any second. Behind him, his co-pilot was already running away from the wreckage. What was his name again? She couldn't remember. Garrus shook her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. They could blow up at any moment, Garrus said, louder, as he half-dragged, half-carried her through the sand. I have to find Kane! Finley yanked her arm out of his grasp. If he wasn't going to help her, then she would get Kane out herself. Before Garrus could answer, the ships exploded. In a ball of orange fire, the force shaking the ground. Metal and fiery debris rained on the sand, leaving Finley to stare at what was left of the crash site. Static hissed on her radio. Finley, come in. Her heart flipped in her chest. Was Kane okay? He was okay, right? Her shaky hands made it nearly impossible to grip the radio. When she finally clicked it on, she strained to hear Bizen's voice. Yes, I'm here. She desperately tried to look through the smoke for any sign of Kane. Maybe he had somehow gotten out on the other side? It's Bison. What happened? Your radio went silent and I've been trying to reach you. The world seemed to stop as Finley's brain registered what was happening. The wreckage continued to burn as her voice caught in her throat. Kane is gone. The ship is gone. It's over. And that was the first chapter of the Moon Run. I'm definitely going to have to add this one to my TBR. Like I said, I love stuff set in space, and I absolutely love two people who don't like each other being forced to work together. So I'm excited to see where the story between Finley and Garrus goes. R.I.P. Kane, you were a real one. And yeah, Finley seems like a lot of fun. I'm excited to see more of her. And I also hope I pronounced, I don't know if it was Bizin or Bison. I'm going to go at a pronunciation guide to the submission form, so sorry I didn't have that in there for the first wave. Author, you are more than welcome to correct me in the comments. But yeah, I will put the link on where to buy this book down below. Please check it out. And thank you again for submitting to the First Chapter Explorers Club. And I will see you all soon with the next first chapter. Let me know in the comments below what you're reading right now, what you're watching, what you're enjoying. I just started Soon I Will Be Invincible by... Oh my god, it stopped being orange. Okay, my Google... I read books in like the Google Play Books app, and it was orange. All my books were orange, and I don't know why, and now it's white again. That's very weird and strange. Soon I Will Be Invincible by Austin Grossman? About a supervillain, which is also very much my jam. I'm very excited. It came highly recommended by a friend. And that is going to be the first episode. I don't know if I want to add more segments in the future to make it a bit longer. I've been calling it a podcast, but this episode is looking like it'll be a nice, short and sweet, somewhere in the 15-minute range. So if you have any suggestions, drop those below. Be sure to check out the author, submit your own story if you are an author, and I will see you next week, is the plan. Haven't decided what day we're going to do this. Yeah, I want you all to know that I had to re-record like the first line of that chapter 10 times. My brain just kept saying the word hundreds incorrectly. So, mad respect to audiobook narrators. I mean, this is a lot of fun. I'm really enjoying recording these first chapters, but, like, my mouth is parched. I can't imagine doing this for hours on end. And also, I'm not great at doing voices, I feel like, but we'll see. We'll see how this shapes up. But yeah, I'm going to call it there for this episode, and I will see you all next week.